Und ich versuche es mal auf Englisch zu machen. Ne?
Ja,
So we're here in front of two works by Camila Janan Rashid, and she is using educational material, but not only educational material, but textbooks, but also scholarly publications, and it's basically strongly referring to the notion of mathematical objectivity, mathematical truth, the idea of numbers being precise and geometrical and mathematical relations being objective, and she's kind of playing with this, turning this around, deconstructing it, and she's doing it especially in relation to certain issues, debates, themes, theoretical issues that have been important in African American discussions recently. For example, this is referring to a publication called The Black Scholar. That's the original logo, as far as I know. And there will be other works in the show that we'll see, where she's even explicitly referring to that relation between mathematics and philosophical directions like Afro-pessimism. And of course, the important thing in this show is the way how she deals with mathematical objectivity, and which is normally the basis for cybernetics, and especially for the cybernetic view of the social. And she's not only deconstructing this by producing differences or distinctions in relation to the social, but also in relation to the aesthetical. So if we see here, for example, I don't know how to say this in English, but the numbers are the exponential functions of 2, the exponential, whatever they call it in English mathematics, of 2, and it has like it is also rendered as kind of an aesthetical proposal. So it's a highly it's a highly thrilling perspective on knowledge and science that she's producing, and that works very well, in my opinion, with the one project that the late Austrian artist Jörg Schlick has started. Each of these photographs, and there are only a certain limited number of different photographs visible here, represents one letter from the human genome. So you know that the genomes are spelled in letters like C, A, G, T, and so on, and these are like actual sequences of these letters, but represented by photographs. So it's not only kind of an attempt to recuperate or appropriate the symbolization of human, if you want, essence by genetics, by translating it into something else. It is also kind of deconstructing or problematizing the idea of photographs as being not symbolical but indexical, which is kind of one of the key ideas of photography is its indexicality, whereas here these indexical photographs of some staircase in the town of Graz become symbols fully. They're no longer any indexical reality to that. And the ontology of photography, in a way, but the political ontology of photography, if you wish, is also a subject matter in these works by Paulo Cheerio, Italian artist Paulo Cheerio. These are all official White House photographs. They are photographs of different US presidents doing things, presidents welcoming Elvis Presley or Michael Jackson or Hans-Dietrich Genscher, or shooting or being shot. This guy is going to be shot pretty soon, and this one is shooting. Yes, and all these photographs are the property of the White House, but they are marketed by Getty. So Getty is kind of selling them, although they used to be used to be free without copyright, because the idea of photographs that the White House is handing out is that they are in the public interest, or that they're part of a public property, and so this kind of what Getty is doing with the White House is basically what happens in primitive accumulation, as Marxism would have it, that a common good becomes a private property, and that the common good here that becomes a private property is on the other side, like a portrait and a glorification of power, is maybe the comic aspect of this work that is also kind of reappropriated by Paulo Cheerio by framing these pictures. So the official title is that he has reframed them. And this kind of question of property, which is in this version of the Cybernetics of the Poor an important aspect, that how like cybernetic digital capitalism is kind of a procedure of a constant kind of stealing or appropriating of individualities, individual data by corporations. So this use of intellectual property or artistic property, or on the other hand of logos and things like that, is also a theme in these very delicate drawings by Michael Hakimi. They are all referring to more or less what one calls these days the informal economy, so street vendors or people who are trying to make some money on the streets using elements of corporate logos or corporate design, yes, and these street vendors, beggars, are part of a series that's continuing on the other side of the hall. So it's you're facing it on the other side. They're facing each other in the same way that also these photographs of Heinrich Riebesil over there are facing the president's portraits on this side. But we're going to see them later on. And in this, the question of like how does one survive in digital capitalism, or how does one survive with what one owns, skills, creativity, properties, etc., and is also the subject that Robert Adrian X has been touching with his little figurines here, that are depictions of all those jobs that he had to do in order to stay alive as an artist. And these were all like temporary jobs, from craft to posing as a model in an art school, or being a caretaker, a house painter, an extra in a film, all kinds of works, also computer works, farming, works on farms, and so on, from blue collar to white collar and back. And so this notion of work is here also articulated by a person who is known in Vienna as a media artist, no? And as someone who, if you see his name on a list of an exhibition that's talking about cybernetics, people would expect his media art, but we chose this type of work. And one aspect of the idea that there is some kind of that the cyberneticization of the world has reached a new stage, that we are talking about in this show and also in the previous edition of this show in San Sebastian Donostia, was that under digital capitalism, the core project of cybernetics, which used to be planning and anticipation and anticipating social behavior for purposes of city planning or healthcare or whatever, or social planning, has become now economized and become profitable and become a business. That is one of the main ideas of the show. But at the same time, it's not only has become a method of making money, but also of influencing and organizing the emergence of political ideas being used by populists and right-wing campaigns, as has become well known through the case of Cambridge Analytica. And because of that, we have decided to show a work by Ferdinand Krivet, a German artist who in the early 70s, starting exactly with this kind of analysis, was portraying the US election, where the alternative was Nixon and McGovern, in 1972, and already working from a perspective that one has today of how elections are organized and how they are also manipulated, and how or strongly influenced by those in power, and also how this is done with the specific use of media and the specific possibilities of media, which is on display here, not only certain images, but also certain graphic design, certain typefaces, layout, etc. That is a specialty of Krivet, this kind of, one could say, artistic research, that with the means of an aesthetic analysis, deciphering the strategies of public influencing or even manipulation, if you want. And what we see here is this is work by Tanja Wittmann, referring to the art market. It's a highly complex and subtle work that refers to a graffito on a piece by Nairi Bagramian that she has seen in the Venice Biennial, and she's kind of matching this with a rare catalog by Wade Guyton, and so this is kind of a work that's not hanging right now, but it is, and it's it articulates the idea that in this show we also want to refer to the art world, the art market, and how counter cybernetics, or even a belief in cybernetics, is plays a role there, and we'll come back to that later. So here is this is another work by Camila Janan Rashid. Here there's a footnote on this book by Kevin Warren, Black Nihilism and the Politics of Hope, so which is kind of a strong reference to those Afro-pessimist debates I was talking about earlier. And here Hanne Darboven refers back, and that is again also a reference to Camila Janan Rashid, to teaching and to the how instruction and teaching in school here for very young children that are, and the thing is sponsored by Langnese, a company that sells ice cream to children, and Tom and Jerry and the Pumuckl as a TV character, and the nickname of Joseph Kosuth, and Hanne Darboven's practice, which has a lot of specific discipline and doing the same thing over and over again, forcing yourself to repeat certain things as in an exercise or as in even some kind of religious discipline. She matches this kind of private discipline here with the discipline that children are forced to obey, and she's calling it a theater, or it is a theater in this appropriated schedule for children. Here we have a part of the show that we call the case studies. This is where we collect documents and books, games, music, and all kinds of documents referring to the history that art practice has with cybernetics. And not only, we have also some artworks there. Here is a work by Sharon Lockhart. These are photographs of models that the Israeli choreographer and dance theoretician Noah Eshkol has produced. And Noah Eshkol has built these three-dimensional objects, these globi, and they are referring to human movement in space, in three-dimensional space. And she has one of the few languages of notating dance and movement developed, which we have here in the documents. And she has become, she was a close friend of cyberneticians like Heinz von Förster, who proposed her to work for NASA and to explore movement in space without gravity. And she has done this for NASA in the early 70s. And here we have shows and artworks that related in the past to cybernetics, from Hans Hake's pieces taken from a book of Jack Burnham, who in his Beyond Modern Sculpture was like an important theoretician of art and cybernetics, or the relation between art and cybernetics, as was also Kynaston McShine, and this is a kind of a visual essay by Kynaston McShine from his show Information, which was on in 1970. So these two curators, Kynaston McShine and Jack Burnham, both have curated shows on software and information around that time. This vitrine here is referring to the battle between the situationists and art theoreticians who were interested in cybernetics. So the French situationists had this problem with Abraham Moles. Here's a book by him, Informationstheorie und ästhetische Wahrnehmung, so Theory of Information and Aesthetic Perception, which has so curious, funny things as a measurement for originality, formulas how you can calculate originality. The same you also find in Max Benz's Aesthetica. And the German situation is like fighting with Max Benz. So here's a comic strip by Gruppe Spur, who also did pranks against Benze, calling him ugly and stupid. Here's a letter by Guy Debord against Abraham Moles. So these are these interesting struggles, because both situationism and conceptual art being pro-cybernetics, situation being counter-cybernetics, are now both part of the canon. And they are both part of the critical canon without distinguishing or without taking into account this conflict. And this is this vitrine talks about, we call it proto-cybernetics, so before cybernetics, thinking that led to cybernetics. And this part here is referring to Otto Neurath, a Viennese scientist, philosopher, graphic designer, curator, museum director. He has his Museum of Society and Economy that he had run in Vienna. And also criticism against Otto Neurath from the side of Frankfurt School critical theory. Max Horkheimer being very, very aggressive against Neurath, calling him a positivist, and which is not so far-fetched, because he was close to so-called logical positivism and the circle of Carnap and others. Well, these other vitrines are not so really visible now. This is about cybernetics and music. Roland Kein, Hieroglyphic Being, and others, Stockhausen, but this is not finished. You cannot. And this is something that Axel Stockburger has done for us, the history of cybernetics in Vienna, very specific. Also, he has shot a film, an interview with Oswald Wiener. And here we have other applications, like we have a cybernetic game on the environment by Frederick Fester, which is like a game in which the factors or actors like the parliament, industry, the environment, education, quality of life, population growth, traffic, and so on and so on and so on. They are all like factors, and here you have little devices by which you can control these factors, and then you get outcomes. A very, very positivist cybernetic view of the problems of environment. This is a board game called The Third Reich, which the writer Roberto Bolaño has not only played but also written a book about it, a novel, a kind of very interesting anti-colonial story that he talks about a German tourist in Spain and a South American political refugee, and playing this game, playing the Second World War a second time. And here another similar board game that has been designed by Alice Becker-Ho and Guy Debord. So Guy Debord comes back here a second time. Yes, well, many things are missing here. Here, Coleman Collins will have a little performative piece here called on his invention, the gilt coin. The gilt coin is kind of a cryptocurrency that works with gilt, and it does start with the strange fact for non-German speakers. Strange fact that in German, debt and guilt are the same word, and the same more or less also a similar concept. And this kind of mixing of morality and economy is the starting point for a little fake company, if you wish, or that will sell, or not even fake, it's real, that will sell gilt coins here to to guilty people in the audience who are interested in such a and these, well, you cannot see much here. Here you have works by Agnieszka Kurant, and they are referring to like the unnamed, unpaid labor of people who use Amazon, for example, and she's translating these productions or these movements into visual objects that are more or less also collective productions by these people who are, for example, doing research or demographics voluntarily or involuntarily for Amazon and comparable companies. Here we are like this is all just layout. Elinor Anton has a piece here in which she is painting her face, which is a little bit about the question of self-representation under certain economic circumstances that we've been talking about earlier, also in relation to Michael Hakimi's work over there. And here is a piece, The Mythical Being by Adrian Piper. And that can also be read in that context. And Douglas Hubler has he has been working on the way how art is representing human beings in several ways and in several conceptual ways, but also very humorous. Not everything is hanging, they're all supposed to hang on the same height and the same level. He has found out about a guy who's been working as a medical designer or draftsman, but who was as a child a very gifted painter, and but he had no ideas. He was just technically gifted. His craft was great, and this guy then in the era of conceptual art, or in the era of, maybe one can even say in the century of Duchamp, these technical qualities were, in his opinion, no longer regarded as important as they were for him, and so he never became a celebrated artist, an artist that had that was as important as he thought he should have, and he responded by correcting masterpieces, and this is a corrected Mondrian, and this is the real Mondrian. The real Mondrian is represented by a poster of the Museum of Modern Art, and the corrected Mondrian is represented by an original. So this is the correction, and you have to look at both images closely, then you find the differences. There are a few differences where this painter has decided to respond with alternative proposals to this masterpiece. And and Douglas Hubler has made a piece of this, which is part of a series, as are so many pieces in this show are part of series. This is a work by Gemma Inchausti, an artist from the Basque Country that that was also in the first version of this show. There she did a piece on the Stasi and like cybernetic control in socialism, and here she's referring to this kind of, like Elinor Anton, with which she's corresponding here, to the selling of the self, and which is of course then also picked up here in the second half of Michael Hakimi's series on street vendors and beggars and people who make a life on the street. And Elena Asins, another Spanish artist, was like maybe one of the earliest computer artists in Spain, and she was a student of Max Bense, who we have as the villain in the conflicts between situationism and cybernetics in this vitrine over there. And this is a piece referring to a little self-conversation in the philosophical investigations of Ludwig Wittgenstein on a four-dimensional cube, and she's proposing a reaction to that. And also, of course, what she's doing is kind of like the blueprint of the concept of series or of repetition, which is so often a structure in either pro-cybernetic or anti-cybernetic art that tries to kind of aesthetically rethink the way mathematical intelligence or artificial intelligence is constructed. So to kind of redefine this for an aesthetic perspective or an artistic perspective. And it's hard to summarize what this work is about. It's again by Paulo Cheerio, who has done this work on the presidential portraits. It's algorithmic methods of apps and programs and digital strategies to influence, channel, generate behavior, and especially in relation to art and advertisement. So it has a lot of to do with, and that's in Paulo Cheerio's work very often an important factor, the way how cultural and artistic communication works, but not only. It's, I mean, like, for example, this one, algorithmic creation of personalized advertising, is not limited to cultural and aesthetical communication, but it's in general how the social is generated in algorithmic structures, and it will correspond then with Tanja Wiedmann's work that will be over there on the other side of the hall on the art market. Here you have a similar to the ideas that we had when we thought we should make a work by we should show work by Ferdinand Kriwet on the U.S. election of 1972 from around the same time. This is 1969. A photographer in the German city of Hanover, who was at that time not thinking of himself as an artist, Heinrich Riebesil. Later he became an artist, later he decided to be an artist or photographic artist. At that time he was more or less a press photographer, and he worked in a newspaper, and he worked on a daily basis on that newspaper. And so whenever he went to his workplace, he took an elevator in the publishing house, and he made photographs from always the same perspective. So he's a human surveillance camera there, huh? And this human surveillance camera always looking at people in the same angle, in the same corner of that elevator. But you have, interestingly, graffiti for the KPD. This is the Communist Party of Germany, which was forbidden since 1956. And had just become another KPD became legal again around 1970, which was a Maoist party then, no longer a Moscow-oriented communist party. And below that, there is a graffiti for the NPD, which is a neo-Nazi party. So you have a communist and a Nazi graffiti in that elevator that everyone who has something to do with this newspaper that he is working for took. And we continue this series in the staircase. Here is a very interesting piece, will be shown on this now dead monitor. It's a piece by Mike Kelly, which is based on the research of a behavioral scientist who was doing kind of very cruel experiments with monkeys in the 1950s, taking them away from their mother and building an artificial mother, building a little object that would function as mother. And this is the starting point for Mike Kelly. And then he has artists and performers and dancers doing the things that this scientist did with the monkeys, but they're doing it in an artistic language that Mike Kelly has been inspired to use by Martha Graham. So they're doing in a modern dance way the behavioral experiments that this behaviorist scientist did with the monkeys in the 1950s. And it's also a very complicated work because it has like two films. One is a black and white, and the other black and white on that monitor, and there's also a projection in color, which is kind of overlapping with the other. And this is the in the middle. There's also a placeholder for a screen. On that screen, you see a short feature film, 30 minutes. In which the story that is told is the story of Stafford Beer. Stafford Beer is a cyberneticist, and a cybernetic scientist from the, this takes place in the 70s. He's been around at that time for a while, and he was especially also trying to apply cybernetics on economics. And on this letter here that you see reproduced here in Spanish, the socialist president of Chile, Salvador Allende, who was the president in Chile till 1973, when a CIA-backed coup d'etat, a fascist coup d'etat by Pinochet, Augusto Pinochet, killed him, basically. He had planned in this short-lived period where Chile tried to develop some kind of socialist economy, he had tried to apply cybernetics on a socialist economy. And in order to do that, he needed a cybernetic expert. So he imported this guy from Britain, Stafford Beer, and they founded an institution called CyberSyn, and that was supposed to replace the planning economy that in conventional socialist countries with a kind of cybernetic planning economy. And it was only very short-lived, and they had this kind of funny central building which looked like a Star Trek, like a Star Trek spaceship, where they were getting the futurist feeling to redefine socialist economy. And this is a logo for that over there. This, these kind of heads. And this is the beginning of the installation of Jean-Michel Euber's highly complex work that will also generate performances, and it's too early to describe what this is. There are also 4 pieces not present that will be in the downstairs section that are not installed. There's a continuation of Heinrich Riebesil's elevator photographies. There is a sound piece by Spanish artist Isidro Valcarcel Medina, in which he's testing certain car motors. The piece is called Motores, and it is and he has a very precise, complicated schedule, like what to do with the motors, in which curve, right curve, left curve, acceleration, and so on. And yeah, but basically you hear a continuous motor sound. And there's a film by Pedro G. Romero, who has sent a well-known Spanish flamenco dancer into a project building in Barcelona, near Barcelona, and this dancer is supposed to use that building. And that building is a typical building that refers to this kind of planning euphoria, or this belief in planning that is characteristic for the early days of cybernetics, where things like how people will use that kitchen, what will happen when they have to go to the bathroom while cooking an egg. But all these things are like part of an elaborate planning scheme, and he's not using this as someone who lives there, as an inhabitant, but he's dancing, and he's dancing in the style of flamenco. And this is similar or comparable with what Lily Renaud-Devar does. Lily Renaud-Devar's film will be shown downstairs too. She's, whenever she gets an institutional invitation, she enters the building where the institution is located, but she's not not as a visitor nor as a researcher, but as a dancer when the institute is closed or when the building is closed, and then she's kind of dancing in all offices, but also in the main building, in the exhibition hall, and in certain parts of the building. She's dancing naked and painted. So her body is painted in a specific color. It's either silver or red, and in a kind of syncopated, jazzy, modern dance style. And that's what she's doing there in Tabakalera, but also probably, hopefully, if COVID-19 allows, here in the Kunsthalle Wien. And she's also doing it in the work of Camilla Sposati. And Camilla Sposati is also downstairs with her work. She produces sculptures that resemble musical instruments, or musical instruments that resemble sculptures, following basically the Brazilian sculptor, composer, musician, artist Walter Smetak, or being inspired by him, but doing different things with that. Of course, again, certain instruments, certain machines, certain devices that are tools for a certain use are used for something else, for something different. It is not clear, as is also with Jan Michael Oiber's work, that we see parts of here, what is the use of an artwork. And then there's also an installation, a 3-channel video installation by Constanze Ruhm, which is a part of the series that she does of films in which characters from well-known movies of the 50s and 60s, of Nouvelle Vague and other kind of progressive author cinema, art house cinema, characters, female characters that get killed in the stories that are told about them, are alive and trying to either speak with the directors or screenplay writers about their fate, or taking revenge, or also trying to die finally without succeeding. So that's it's a burial story that she's talking about, and this is another reversal scene, also a reversal of. And another thing that I've forgotten is here where we also see only elements from the piece by Katrin Stumreich called "What Would Ted Kaczynski's Daughter Do?" And Ted Kaczynski is the the real name of the so-called Unabomber, this kind of eco-terrorist, a guy who sent bombs to people who were involved with cybernetics or technology or computers. He was or was or is, he's still alive, he's in jail. Tried to basically destroy the world of cybernetic culture. And yeah, but he did it in a very, I mean, he sent bombs to people who had a computer shop in Santa Monica, not the real evil guys. Cut. Hallo?